A new report by the Bureau of Labor Statistics finds that a whopping 4.3 million Americans decided to quit their jobs in August. And guess what? That trend continues even though the federally subsidized unemployment benefits expired more than a month ago. So what's going on here? Now in August, some 892,000 workers quit accommodation and food services jobs, and 721,000 quit retail positions, and that's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics data. The healthcare sector also took a hit. 534,000 US workers resigned or quit from healthcare and social assistance positions. And no, the healthcare workers didn't quit due to vaccine mandates. They quit because they're overworked, understaffed, and they want better working conditions, they want better pay. In fact, I'll get to that in just a second. But first, a few more figures for you. Meanwhile, the 7.7 million people who remain unemployed aren't, for the most part, jumping at the roughly 10.4 million job openings, leaving businesses or business after business with help wanted placards in their windows. And I'm pretty sure that you can see it if you're taking a walk in town. You'll notice those signs at windowsills, and people are like, well, what's going on? Why are people going back to work? I mean, everyone was so certain it had to do with the federally subsidized unemployment benefits, right? Everyone was so certain that it was because Americans were just lazy, they were couch potatoes, they didn't want to go back to work, and that the federal government was enabling them to do it. But it turns out that is not the case. Americans want better pay, they want better working conditions, and they need childcare. Something that's offered through the budget reconciliation bill, which of course has a shaky future considering the fact that we have bought off corporate Democrats in the Senate that are standing in the way of the passage of that bill. Now, again, let me just really emphasize the point that those unemployment benefits had nothing to do with workers and their hesitation in taking these low-paying jobs. In fact, Mark Zandi from Moody's Analytics says, I'm sure that some economists someday, digging through some data, will be able to prove there was some effect on the margin of the supplemental unemployment insurance, but it's really on the margins. On the top 10 list of reasons why people have been slow to get back to work, that might be number 10. Now, why are people refusing to go back to work? Why are people quitting? Well, why don't we hear from the workers themselves?
In the last year, the rate at which workers ages 30 to 45 resigned rose by over 20%. Some of the hardest hit sectors: healthcare and tech. The specific reasons, first and foremost perhaps, burnout.
Your staffing is at an all-time low. The morale is at an all-time low. It's traumatic, it's stressful. We're at a breaking point.
We don't want to do this anymore.
They just didn't care about me anymore.
I'm done. I am not working here anymore. I don't feel safe.
Workers like these are quitting their jobs at the highest rate in 20 years. Because for many of us, the pandemic has prompted a professional reassessment. So says Harvard Business School's Sidal Neely.
We cannot underestimate the extent to which people have experienced such stress, such anxiety, and a ton of burnout in the last 18, 19 months. That is also driving their interest to say, I don't want this lifestyle as it is, I want to change it.
They don't like that lifestyle, they want to change it. And remember, when everything was shut down in the beginning of the pandemic and Americans were home, either they were working from home or they were just home spending more time with their families, that gave them an opportunity to really reimagine what life could be like if they had a little more say, a little more power in the workplace, if they had a little more time to themselves, time for hobbies, time for cooking. I mean, think about the amount of time the average American worker puts into his or her job or several part-time jobs just to make ends meet. And how much time is really left over for that worker on any given day to manage their personal lives. I mean, there's still that component of life as well, whether it's grocery shopping, taking care of your kids and all that, or to just do something enjoyable. And think about basically having to do that day after day for pay that doesn't actually cover the costs that you need to pay for. Things like childcare, for instance. And that continues to be a huge problem. In April of 2021 alone, 64,000 female workers left the job force. And part of the reason why, or massive reason why, is because they could not afford childcare. And that's something that needs to be fixed. It's something we'll get into more detail later on in the show. But what's also fascinating to see is that workers, for the first time in literally decades, have some leverage. So when it comes to the workers who are refusing to go back to work, they have some demands. They want flexibility, they want better pay, better working conditions. But what about the workers who are still employed? Turns out that we're starting to see some organizing taking place that's actually pretty effective. And I want to give you a few examples. More than 100,000 unionized employees between Hollywood production crews, John Deere factory workers, and even Kaiser Permanente healthcare workers are threatening to strike unless they get better contracts that offer better pay, better treatment, better working conditions. And guess what? They're able to do that because for the first time in such a long time, they have the leverage to do so. So let's go into the details of that. So in a near unanimous vote, unions representing more than 24,000 Kaiser Permanente nurses and other healthcare workers in California and Oregon authorized a potential strike after contract negotiations stalled. Roughly 38,000 Kaiser workers have now authorized their union leaders to call a strike if necessary. So what they're asking for is, in my opinion, totally rational. Think about what healthcare workers have gone through during this pandemic. They want better pay. In the case of these Kaiser nurses, they're asking for a 4% increase, annual raise as a result of this new contract, right? Now, the offer was only 1% in an annual raise. And so the workers are like, nah, we're not accepting that contract. We want something better. The employers also wanted to create this two-tiered system where the current Kaiser workers would be paid better than new Kaiser workers, meaning that the new contracts wouldn't apply to new employees. And I really commend the nurses here for rejecting that because they do not want to create a two-tiered system. They want solidarity in the workplace and they demand better. So there's a possibility that tens of thousands of Kaiser nurses could strike unless these negotiations move forward in a positive way. John Deere workers, we're talking about factory workers, more than 10,000 of them could walk out after overwhelmingly voting to reject a new contract negotiated between the farm equipment manufacturer and United Auto Workers over the weekend. Now, let's get into some specifics here because they were offered a pretty significant pay raise. However, they're demanding more, and it makes a lot of sense given how much this company has made in revenue. So 90% of the union's members rejected the proposal that would provide immediate 5 to 6% raises for most workers. Workers said the pay raises were inadequate given that John Deere is expected to make nearly $6 billion, that's with a B, $6 billion in profits this year. That's not revenue, that's profits. That means after John Deere pays everyone, pays their bills, cost of operating, all that. After all of that is said and done, they make or made $6 billion in profits alone. No, you gotta give the workers more pay because you can't produce that kind of revenue, you can't produce that kind of profit without the workers, period. And I love the fact that they're standing their ground on this issue. And then there are the 60,000 workers in the entertainment industry who are represented by IATSE. And they're demanding better working conditions. Let me give you the details on that. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees is demanding more time for meal breaks and sleep, along with better wages and an end, I love this part, to lower pay for workers who help produce streaming shows. Both sides want to avoid a strike, but would shut down the production of popular TV shows and movies, which would, of course, shut down the popular production of TV and movies. Look, again, the solidarity that's a common theme throughout the various strike threats here is really something that I'm happy to see, right? The unwillingness to create these two-tiered pay systems within these companies, I think it's incredibly important. And what's also really great to see is that for the first time in a long time in this country, we're seeing widespread support for organized labor. A Gallup poll from September shows that Americans' approval of unions is at a 60-year high, with more than 2/3 of those surveyed and 77% of Americans ages 18 to 34 voicing support for organized labor. Look, these employers thought they could just do whatever they want, create a situation where workers are desperate and they have no choice but to take any job they can and get away with it. But I guess the silver lining in this incredibly awful and tragic pandemic is that it created a situation where workers kind of woke up. They were shaken out of their complacency and they realized that they have some leverage. All they need to do is really organize and use the leverage they have to demand better working conditions and better pay. And I love to see it. And I especially love to see all of those congressional bums who called for an end, a premature end to the unemployment benefits because they thought it was making workers lazy. I'm happy to see that they're proven wrong now. But will they admit that they were wrong? No. Because of course they're paid by their corporate donors to just repeat what their corporate donors want. And that's the fact that, hey, we gotta make these workers desperate. We can't make them comfortable. We don't wanna pay them more than what the unemployment benefits offer them. So just end the unemployment benefits. Let's make them so desperate that they have to take our crappy jobs. Nah, workers aren't gonna stand for it, and I love to see it.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.